Our next speaker is Matt Tyndal. Matt has been a perfusionist for over 40 years, graduated from Texas Art Institute. He's a fellow member of American Academy of Perfusion, and he started his career as at Denver Children's Hospital and moved to Birmingham, and currently is doing the private practice. He's going to talk about unexpected evolution of the legacy perfusion program at UAB. Please join me welcoming Matt.
Well, I have some disclaimers and disclosures, I guess. My disclaimer is that you won't be experiencing another tour de force math class like Richard gave us a minute ago. In fact, it's going to be the very opposite. I'm just a dumb kid from Alabama, educated in Texas, and just going to tell you a little story. As far as disclosures, Quest Medical has sponsored this talk, and so I guess let's get into it. We at UAB had a bunch of old heart-lung machines, and it's time to come forward. And we've got to have a bunch of perfusionists that we need to educate for this. So we came up with a plan, and I'm going to tell you about it, and some of the sideways stuff. UAB has been performing cardiac surgery for quite some time, therefore perfusion as well. Started with the first cardiac case in '62, but really kicked into high gear when John Kirkland arrived in '66. A number of firsts in the state, in the area, and a couple in the world occurred under our roof, and we participated in that. We've become quite a large group. We have 21 perfusionists. We can work on our diversity, I think, a little bit, but we're getting there, and a broad range of experience. And, well, that speaks for itself. It's interesting, I hadn't really realized this, but we have a lot of young, new, very talented perfusionists that have joined us and brought a lot of energy to our group. And then there's some of us silverbacks on the right side that the guys on the left are hoping will be pushed out sooner than later. And we came from, a lot of us came from Texas, but pretty broad spectrum of education. And here's a picture of our group. I don't know if any of you recognize this from this book, Who Moved My Cheese, but this is very germane to this conversation. We'll talk about that later. This was us a year ago when we started this process. A little video for you. Should have. That's right.
Okay. Did you start on headphones? Yes, that's correct. Yes. Go ahead, try it again.
It's okay. The audio is really not very important. Basically, it's Dr. John Kirkland telling Becky, the perfusionist, to go on bypass, and is everything okay? And she responds yes, in her closed loop communication. And he says coldest water, and we cool down. So this was a case probably not a year ago. This was more like mid 70s. But it's interesting nonetheless. But here we go. Heart-lung machines have come a long way, have they not?
Looks fine. A machine has taken over the work of the heart and lungs. It seems routine today, But the first time Dr. Kirkman used it on 5-year-old Linda Stout, it was anything but routine.
So this is more up to date. This is where we have been in the last year or so. We have a fleet of Terumo System 1s that have been absolute workhorses for us, rock solid. But the technology is 25 years at this point. It was, when it came out, it was absolutely cutting edge, and it's now reaching the end of life. So we had to make a decision of where we were going to go with it. And we decided as a group that we were going to use the Spectrum pump. So this is kind of a story about how we started that. And we decided that we were going to change, and we had some pushback because not everybody wanted to change. And back to our little guys, how many of you read Who Moved My Cheese? Okay, so you know that there's a broad spectrum of, in any group, of attitude about change. And you have the guys on the right, and sometimes I live in that group, and you have sniff and scurry, and they're open to new ideas, and they run to them, and they gravitate towards that, and it's exciting. And then you have the guys on the left, hem and haw, and why do we have to change? I don't want to change. It's not fair that we have to change. Well, such is life. So we had made the decision that we were going to have new heart-lung machines. And the initial thought was, well, let's make it look as much like what we have now as possible. But we decided not to do that. We decided to push things forward and to try to optimize our circuitry, shorten our tubing lengths, and make some progress. So we chose the Cheltenham frame. I guess I'm saying that right to my British fellows. So we had 11 pumps, 2 of which were end of life. I mean, literally, we couldn't use them any longer. So we decided to start this rollout with a small group. So we bought 2 Spectrum machines and asked a group of 5, which incidentally were the robotic team, because the robotic surgeons were banging the table that they wanted the new heart-lung machine. So it worked out pretty well. We were tasked with first configuring the heart-lung machines and trying to optimize that, then to modify the existing tubing pack and create a new one, present the progress to the rest of the team and show it to them in a non-threatening way, and then ask them their feedback and then try to implement it. We went through several cycles of that before we got to and this is this is maybe the first case that we did with it. We took our old tubing pack and put it on the machine in basically the same configuration as our System 1s. We have since changed a number of things. The orientation of the oxygenator, the orientation of the occluders, the suctions are all in a different order. But this is where we started. So we started from what we knew, and we found what was going to suit us the best over time. Happily, we were able to eliminate a good bit of tubing and a lot of surface area from our packs, shorten things. And, you know, you would think that you throw all this away, that your new pack's going to cost less than your old pack. Well, that is never the case. And on the right, this is the sample that we approved for our new pack. We got our 2 machines in December of 22. We approved the pack in March. We finally got our sterile samples. We were beginning to train the rest of the group. Slowly, the people that were interested were participating, and things were going well. We had 4 more machines coming in the fall, and so we were ramping up to prepare for that. And then somebody moved our cheese. You'll all recall the demise of CAPS and the loss of our cardioplegia solutions. Well, that happened in the middle of this, and we had to rethink, how are we going to protect the heart? if we can't get the solutions. We started with back orders, which nobody really, it didn't really set off a big alarm for us initially until they closed the Pennsylvania facility, and the FDA was involved. We then went on allocation to get our solutions from Arizona, and our pharmacy was unable and, to be honest, unwilling to compound the solutions for us. And there was a very real possibility that we were going to run out of cardioplegia and we were going to have to cancel cases or do something different. So we spent a lot of time with the surgeons, had some real heart-to-heart conversations about what were we going to do, how were we going to do it. That was about a year ago. And at this meeting, of course, these are the Uncle Bucky solutions that we've been using for decades and love. We had gravitated toward Del Nido, and we were using that more and more, but still the vast majority of cases were done with 4-to-1. Buckberg, our circuit on the System 1 was such that we could break these lure connectors on the inlet of the roller pump, and we could convert it very easily from 4-to-1 Buckberg to 1-to-4 Del Nido. But they became obsolete and not very useful, so we had to change a lot of things. This is an allocation letter saying, you know, you may or may not get your cardioplegia, but this is what we're hoping to send you. It took a lot, really, to get everybody to buy into this. Of course, pharmacy is concerned about just putting a bunch of potassium up there with the people, with a bunch of us, that what are we going to do with it? Are we going to hurt anybody? They got over that. We went through the decision to trial the microplegia. Some things were considered, Plegiosol and HTK were considered and rejected. It was even suggested maybe we make our own microplegia set, with a syringe pump and add a roller, or add it to a roller pump circuit, but realized it wouldn't be servo regulating. That was probably just a really bad idea. So we contacted Quest Medical and had an amazing response. I'm just really going to give them a shout out, because within a week we had 7 MPS3s on the ground installed on our heart-lung machines. Now, only 2 of us out of the 21 had had any experience with them, so we had a pretty big challenge from a educational standpoint. We had to bring everybody up to speed very rapidly. Quest was incredibly helpful with that. They had a remarkable level of clinical support. They sent a gaggle of people that were very competent and interested and very helpful, which led to a complete conversion to microplegia. Quest is clearly the leader and the experts in microplegia. The evolution of their machine up to the most recent one has been very impressive. How many of you use microplegia or have experience with it? So how many of you didn't have experience with it 2 years ago? So less than I would have thought, because I think that it changed with the loss of our 4-to-1 solutions. But at any rate, it's a remarkably adept device, and you can change on the fly what you're giving, the ratios, and accomplish different things. This is the blood path of it. It's a nice animation. You know that it requires a positive preload from your circuit. Then there are these 2 piston pumps that act as ventricles and pump the blood into the heat exchanger. The new machine has these syringes where you can fill up with 60 cc's each, which is get you through a case most of the time. Very precise delivery of drug, and then makes it cold and comes out. We don't use the bifurcated line, we just use the antegrade line, and if they use retrograde, it's done at the field. So the logistics for us, we have 8 surgeons, 21 perfusionists, 13 assistants who actually go to the Pyxis and get our drugs from there, bring them to us, and we draw them up. We've got a host of anesthesia people, and then pharmacists and techs. So a bunch of people had to get involved in the thinking through the process of how are we going to do this safely. We had to develop protocols for microplegia, and I will say that if you're starting from scratch, there is no clear way to go. I mean, there's not a single recipe. That's one of the strengths, and I think one of the hard parts about moving to a device like this is because you can do anything you want. It's not like you just get a bag of Buckberg solution and you put it in a roller pump and you get delivered what it is. You can tailor this on the fly. We did have some issues with that because we started without written protocols, and we just tried to talk people through it. Well, we ended up with some incredibly high potassiums initially, until we learned or educated that we could actually on the fly dial the potassium down. And we then decided we wanted to try to do a micro del nido, known as KBC. So we had learned a little bit from our microplegia protocol delivery, so we did a little better job when we moved to KBC, and we use that probably 10 to 15% of our cases. The important consideration was to ensure that all of the perfusionists were doing the same thing, and so that the results were the same. And that took some time, but we have, I think, really gotten pretty much there. Honestly, one of our biggest struggles has to get consistency from our surgeons, because sometimes they want to change from KBC to microplegia on the fly during the case or whatever. And it's all possible, but it just takes some adaptation, I guess. Pharmacy did a great job for us in quantifying this and making sure that we were safe. There, on the bottom right, there's a statement. Basically, they say FEMA allowed us to proactively assess the risk points associated with arguably the most dangerous drug within our institution. And I agree with them. You can really hurt people. So they have held us accountable and facilitated this transition for us. We're now beating on them. Hopefully they will fill our syringes for us, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. And the beauty of this whole thing for us is we've been able to integrate these two devices together, and they talk. And so the Quest sends all of its information across to the Spectrum into the Viper, which is our EMR, and so we have a very nice record of what we've done. And this is our current system. We have 6 of the Spectrum heart-lung machines, and we have 5 of the Terumo System 1s that have between 1 and 5 years of life left. So within 5 years, we will be 100% a Spectrum shop. We have Quests on all of them. We've had 21 trained and I guess competent perfusionists and 8 satisfied surgeons. So that's all I have. Thank you.
On behalf of Sanibel 24, I thank all the speakers. But what Rich and Matt agree with me, Dr. Elliott is very special to us today. For me personally, history is not a story. History is the essence of hard work, dedication, sacrifice, motivation, and they left something for us to make them what we are today. So if you take Dr. Elliott's lifestyle for the past 50, 60 years, his contributions, not just to the cardiac surgery, pediatric cardiac surgery, not to the medical field, not to the perfusion, but overall to the society. His contribution is a great accomplishments. So I would like to request everyone to put your hands together as a sign of gratitude what all is sacrificed over the years. So the floor is open for a few questions now. Let me ask the first question to Dr. Elliott. Healthcare providers in the current trend, people are looking for work-life balance. In 2012, Dr. Philip H.K. from London, he wrote a textbook about cardiopulmonary bypass. During that time, he assessed like 40% of the perfusion students are leaving the program because they don't feel a good work-life balance. But when we are seeing as a giants like you, especially in the past 3 months, I watched around 19 videos. I know for each presentation how much time is required, but what motivates you to continuously work? Because when we do something, coming for the conference, making presentation, how much compromises we have to do and all those things comes along. But for 50, 60 years of your contribution, as a giants in pediatric cardiac surgery, what motivates you to continuously serve for the society?
I get bored really easily. So, and I mean, it's a good job my wife isn't here to answer that question for me. So, I suppose the true answer is I'm eternally curious. And there's a very good American philosopher called Stephen Tumin. Some of you may know him. And he was asked some very similar question late in his career. They said, what do you think the most important thing is about what you've done? And he took ages to answer. It was a long silence. Everybody was getting restless in the room. And eventually he looked up and said, hanging around smart people. And if I had to go back and say why I liked what I've done, because I spent so much of my time hanging around smart people. I was crap at school. I was really bad as a student. And it was only because I really enjoyed working with other people. You absorb stuff. And so it's nothing to do with me. I think it's just curiosity. And I think it's a great pleasure to have it.
Thank you, sir. One more question regarding artificial intelligence that scares us. In the past few meetings, in all the meetings, perfusion meetings, people are talking about artificial intelligence. You have seen so many decades, so many changes. Just Matt's presentation, the pump started from like 50, 60 years back and what we are doing now. And now we are talking about an element which is called as artificial intelligence. What is your prediction? Is the artificial intelligence is going to micromanage the healthcare providers, or it is going to help us to do the best job?
I'm absolutely convinced that it's going to change everything, but almost certainly for the better with some mistakes along the way. I think we will have to learn to adapt it. I mean, there was no internet when I started. It's really hard to imagine you would do anything now without asking Google, even if it's pushing advertisements to you for its first 20 pages. I mean, you need to, we used to spend hours and hours in a library. And I loved it because you would always pick out or go home with the book next to the one you went in for. The serendipity. And I think something about artificial intelligence might bring that back because it brings things to you that you weren't expecting. My contact with it is growing, and it's pretty humbling to see the rate it's changing. The people who make the stuff are slightly scared because some of it can program itself and it may not need us. Then what happens? But all that's down the way. People are going to work it out. I'm excited by it. I'm not bothered by it.
Thank you, Dr. Elliott. And the floor is open for the questions for speakers if you have some.
This is to my colleague from UAB. What made you choose Spectrum as your pump? What went into that? Because I'm at the end of life with my pumps right now, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here is to look at what's available and try to guide my hospital in that direction?
Well, we had transitioned to Viper as our record several years before, and so that had a role in it because it was seamless. That's the part of the interface that you deal with. That is the interface that you deal with. You just toggle back and forth between the pump manager and the Viper screen itself is on the same monitor. We've been very impressed by the level of ingenuity and innovation that Spectrum has been. They've been at an incredible rate of innovation, I think, in the last 10 years, 5 years, and then the heart-lung machine is just phenomenal. So that's not a terribly good answer to your question, but those are. There was a lot of visceral response as to what we liked. There was really no option to stay with Terumo since they don't have a new generation machine at this point. Some of us had used the Soren machines in other places with good results. We liked them, but the reality is the Spectrum was ready for us. We were comfortable already with Viper, and those are probably the reasons.
Anybody? I have a comment about equipment.
Sure.
I think you guys made great choices. You know, everybody picks what's best for their team. But yeah, you have to be proactive, and you think, I'm not going to get another machine for 10 years. And what's going to happen in that time? You know, perfusionists are moving around a lot. Surgeons are also. If you get a new surgeon that comes and has different techniques, they might need something different. So the vendors are giving us much more flexibility in those items so that they will last us without having to buy something new, hopefully. And then I do have another question from the online forum, and this is for Richard. Do you guys practice with an N+1 model, and is it all the time, emergencies too, or do you think that's important?
We do. We do practice with the N+1 model at all times. I'd like to give a little more to that. You know, I started my career in a center, in a pediatric center, that it was solo. You were solo, and you did everything by yourself, for yourself, and you. If your colleague came in your room during your case, and you're like, "What's going on? You okay? You lost? I'm good with my case." You know. Moving on to where I am currently at job. N+1 model, it's very nice. It's very nice to have that extra person around, be able to talk with them during a case. If you need a break, they're there for you. And especially it's a great, safer model to do. So if you don't have the N+1 model, I would highly suggest for you to advocate to your administrators, not just the convenience of it, but need to have as safe as a practice you possibly can. It's very important to have that.
Richard?
I'll ask a question in terms of the N+1, because one of the problems that we face is that we don't have enough cases to go around to keep numbers up. So we have, a few females, particularly that have gone part-time once they've had children. And so if you go to that, plus somebody who's coming up to retirement, therefore he's come down on his numbers and also on calls, how do you then manage it so that you have sufficient cases for everybody to do there, to keep their skills up in that case?
When you have that part-time situation, that's difficult. That's difficult. Go ahead.
No, it's the idea of asking is really, then do we need to think about how we recredit? Is it now moving away from this idea of I have to do, I say 40 bypasses every year or whatever it might be, and move to a situation where we are doing simulation and you have to do a certain number of simulation scenarios? Is that going to be something that we need to think about more going forward? Because that will give you the far better understanding of bypass. I mean, is going on and going off bypass 40 times a reasonable, indication of your skill sets? Or should it be, I've done 20 oxygenator change outs, I've done emergency pump use every year,
Sure.
and that will get me out of a situation more than I've come off bypass.
I don't know if I have a true solution to your question, but I will say this. My career up to about 3 years ago, and my colleague could probably, attest to this as well, our practice was very busy. We did, usually 600 to 700 a year, and we only had 4 or 5 perfusionists for that, enabling us to do over 100 cases a year. And that's how I practiced for pretty much my whole career. And that is a very nice number. It essentially gives you about 2 to 3 cases a week. Allowed you to do, especially in the pediatric realm, your 100 kilo patients all the way down to your 1.2 kilo truncus, and you feel pretty comfortable going through things, right? Mm-hmm. We have added more people for that work-life balance, but also we're very involved with MCS and ECMO as well, right? And that has brought we went from 5, 6 up to 10, and our volume is around 600 now. So 60 cases versus 120, there's a difference. To your point, I think it's really important to have that virtual reality or that some sort of wet lab scenario where you can go in if you want to do simulation and do it. And also maybe a practice should mandate that. You need to do either real or simulation cases 10 a month to make sure that you're on top of all your skills. And that's probably not too far off of reality. And there might be some centers that already do that.
But yeah, I completely agree. But is there something that we should think actually that it should be a standardized thing? We're talking about perfusion across borders, for example, as a sort of global almost committee. You almost want to say actually these are the standards that you should try and reach. It's not going to work for everything in different scenarios, but maybe that's something that we should aim for in terms of safety. I mean, as Martin's been showing over the last couple of days, those the pit stops, for example. They don't just say, we're going to take the wheels off 40 times, put them back on 40 times, and therefore we've done a pit stop. There's a lot of other things that come in. It's not just you going on bypass. It's being able to have that simulation with the other characters in a situation where you are stepping out of your comfort zone, which is what you are trying to mitigate against when it goes wrong.
So there's another little thing that I think was very relevant from that time about training, and it applies to a lot of communication skills in meetings. Video and audio, everything you do. So all the body language stuff is not recognized if you don't record it and show it to the people who are behaving badly. So the dialogue you talked about, the doctor we're not allowed to mention, that will be recorded on video and audio. People's behavior changes. And I would argue if you're going to do simulation, which I think you should, you include video and audio. The second thing is, the last thing I want to say about this is, I've really enjoyed coming here, but looking at the slides, you still haven't got the ergonomics of pumps sorted out. What a tangle of tubing you're left with. It looks awful. And if you were in the Mercedes garage building a Formula One car, it would not be allowed to look like that. And why is it still such chaos? It looks as though you could trip over it, catch your elbow in it, give the wrong thing at some point. That hasn't changed. Every film I've got of a bypass machine for 40 years looks like that. But the machines are better, but the ergonomics are not.
I don't have an answer for that one. But I will say this. A great pediatric perfusionist told me when I was even first starting out, this is over 20 years ago, this gentleman said, Rich, just keep it simple, stupid. In and out. Don't have all this craziness. There are great things that come from certain types of techniques and technology that helps us out on our daily cases, and it's wonderful. But yes, maybe a little bit of combination of both. A little simple, stupid, but also advancement in technology at the same time.
We'll get Richard's AI to redesign it.
Okay, we are on time. Thanks again to the speakers, and the next session follows with lunch. Thank you.